Time to get back to SQL. As I mentioned in the first section of the course, structured query language is the shared vocabulary of relational databases. It's not for general-purpose programming. It's a small language focused purely on working with databases, and the first handful of keywords that you'd learn, maybe a dozen, will take care of 90% of everything you'd ever do in SQL. And we do have an entire course on SQL here at lynda.com. It's Bill Weinman's SQL Essential Training. But I would be remiss to have a database course that doesn't talk about SQL, so in the next few videos, I'll cover the basics. Now, I said there's perhaps a dozen very useful keywords in SQL, but in terms of frequency, there's one that's head and shoulders above all the others. By far, the most common word you'll ever write in SQL is select. This is the word we start with when we want to select or read information from one of the tables in one of our databases. We're using it to ask the database a question, and we expect a reply. And actually, the better word is not question, but query. A query, as in the Q in SQL, structured query language. So I'll begin this with select. But if I want to select some data out of my database, I'm going to have multiple tables and multiple columns in each table. So I need to say what specific part of this database am I interested in selecting. And the general format of a select statement is the word select, what columns you're interested in, then the word from, what table. Select and from are your SQL keywords. They're part of the SQL language itself. Now, the columns and table names are up to you. It's whatever you named your columns and your tables in your database. So if you're interested in getting some information, say, out of this employee table, I'll just pick one of the columns, first name, and the name of the table itself. So select first name from employee. Now, running or executing this query would return all the values in that first name column from all the rows in the employee table, whether that's one row or 100,000 rows or none. Now, you often want multiple column values, so if you want multiple columns, you separate them with commas, first name, comma, last name. If I run that query, we get both columns, again for all the rows in that employees table. If, on the other hand, I want all the columns in this table, I don't actually have to write them all. I can use the asterisk instead. So just select asterisk or select star is the common phrase that you'll hear from employee. And this would return every column for every row in the employee table. It's basically saying just show me everything in that table. Now, because you often want to restrict what is returned, optionally you'll add another keyword to your query, which is where. This is your where clause, where a particular condition is true. So where last name is equal to green, or where employee ID equals 474. Salary greater than 50,000. And the next video I'm going to talk about what's allowed in the where part of a query, but there's a couple of things you may be wondering already. First, what about case sensitivity is going on here? What's going on with uppercase and lowercase? How much does it matter? Well, SQL is not case sensitive, generally speaking. It really doesn't care if the word select here is written uppercase or lowercase. Now, by long convention over many years, most developers will write the SQL keywords all uppercase. It makes these statements easier to read. Your table names and column names, on the other hand, should just match however they were named in the database, whether that was lowercase, uppercase, mixture, whatever. Having said that, many database management systems don't even care about that, and they treat table names and column names as case insensitive too. Now, line breaks also don't matter. SQL is not sensitive to white space. You can split an SQL statement across multiple lines, as I'm doing here for readability. Now, officially, a complete SQL statement should be ended with a semicolon, though in practice many database management systems just don't care. But you'll see the semicolon on most of what I write to make it explicit. Currently, I'm selecting everything from the employee table, but one question you might have is, what if you have multiple databases? How does it know which database this table is in? After all, I could even have several databases containing tables with the same name. If that's the case, I need to use not just the table name, but the name of the database itself in my SQL statement. Now, depending on where you're writing it, the database management system may assume that you're already pointing to a particular database. There's often a default database for the database server if you don't name one explicitly. But if I wanted to be explicit, I'd use the name of the database, then a period, then the name of the table. So here I'm making the assumption I have a database called Human Resources, and I'm interested in the employee table inside that database. This can be done a little differently depending on the database management system, but it is usually this simple. Now, right now, these statements are only selecting from one table at a time. We can write SQL to bring back information from multiple tables in the same query, depending on the relationships we've defined, but that comes later. First, we need to take a closer look at the where clause.